Hey everybody, it's Obnoxious Rhinoceros. One of the biggest questions I get on Instagram about my cartoons is how do I color them? And I just recently got this nifty screen capture tool, so I was able to record myself coloring last week's Obnoxious Rhinoceros cartoon. So I thought I'd make a little video and show you how it happens. These are my cartoons that have got it sped up about 15 to 20 times the speed that I actually color them. And I do the drawing on a sketch pad with a mechanical pencil and a big rubber eraser. I've thought about doing them on on the computer or like on a Wacom tablet, but I only have so much time to do drawing, and I like to spend time with my family. And I got the sketch pad handy, and I can sit in the living room or out on the porch or wherever we are and draw and still be with everybody. And then, it only takes me about half an hour each time I color these. You can see from the cartoon that I use Photoshop, and, it's all about layers and gradients and opacities. And I'll explain more on the next cartoon. I just did the shadows in this one. I think when you put the shadows in on a cartoon, it really helps it pop. I started doing all the titles separately because I never get the title centered quite right, and I don't always know exactly where the edges of my square is going to be when I'm drawing. Here's one where I've scanned in the original, and I'm cropping it down to the square that I'm actually going to draw in. I fill in the white for the dialogue bubbles first, and then I find the big swaths of color that I can fill in quickly and start drawing that first. And all the characters and the bubbles, they're on a main layer on Photoshop. Because in a minute here, when I'm done drawing the characters, I'll go to the background. And there you go, fill the whole thing in brown. I'm going to get the color just right, play with a texture brush on its own layer, and then I drop the opacity down so that it's not too distracting. Fill in the details. We're going to create another layer, and I'll drop a shadow in the background here in a minute. Here I am filling in the shadows on the characters. This is the part that I think really helps them pop. Put in my watermark, which I don't like to do. In this one, I forgot the quotes on the end of it, so I stole with Photoshop the quotes from the beginning to close the quotes on his dialogue bubble. The prompt in this one was rainbow fire alarm. Sometimes nouns can be adjectives when they are modifying something. And I couldn't. Rainbow fire alarm was a stretch to come up with an idea that fit it. But sometimes the idea sort of comes. And I remember seeing photographs of kids like in New York, black and white photographs in the summer, playing in fire hydrants to beat the heat. I chose to color this fire hydrant red because that's the color we have in our minds of what fire hydrants are. But I was driving around the other day and passed by dozens of fire hydrants. Not one of them was red. I can't actually remember the last time I saw a red fire hydrant. Ours are all silver with green or blue. But sometimes when we're drawing, we want to use colors that are sort of recognizable. We expect things to be a certain color. Tree trunks are brown, leaves are green, and when they're not, usually we do that on purpose. Here I use gradients to fill in the rainbow and put mist around the water coming out of the fire hydrant. I'm drawing puddles now. The temptation to draw water as blue, but when we see puddles in the ground, they're actually black, and then they reflect the sky with hints of white and hints of blue, or maybe even, from the clouds in the sky. After all that time I spent on the puddles getting that effect right, in a second here I'm going to drop the caption right on top of it. You won't see it. That happens sometimes. I'm real proud of a thing I've drawn or colored, and then I cover it up with the caption. This illustration's not so much a joke, but someone had suggested cotton doors, and I had this memory of being a kid when my mother would still sometimes hang the sheets on the clothesline out in the back of the house. And it's a real temptation to run around and play in that. And so instead of cotton doors, I changed this to linen labyrinth. And even though there's no joke, I really like the illustration. And what I wanted, the challenge here was to get the effect of the light on the sheets just right, because the sheets are sort of translucent. And there's going to be shadows and highlights that I put in there a little bit. We were talking earlier about how you expect certain things to be certain colors, and often in these the sky is blue, but I wanted this one to be either probably sunset, so I have that sun that comes in over the mom's head there, some lilacs in the bushes back there, and for that effect on the sun I just use a brush that has a soft edge, and I put it on the very top layer on top of the lines even, so that it looks like the sunburst is shining over. So you saw earlier I'd pulled the sheets and made them their own layer, and I set the opacity just down a little bit, and now I'm filling in underneath that layer the shadows, and then I put some highlights in there underneath that layer too to make it seem like the light's kind of shining through. Put in the shadows on the figures to give them that extra 3-dimension pop. The caption. I like this one. Finish up a little shadow there. This one was a pretty easy one to color because I had lots of big solid surfaces, big chunks. Get those potatoes filled in real easy. I was joking on Instagram that when I can't come up with one real good joke, then I'll use 3 dad jokes. But I just like the idea of potatoes in a gravy boat on a sea of gravy. Here I'm able to use the select tool to select big chunks of the waves and color just inside of those. It makes it easy to put the shadows in. I was going to do a blue sky in this one, and then I remembered what I was talking about before, how things aren't always the colors that we expect them to be, and a gray sky on the rolling gravy sea seemed to make more sense. About once a month I like to revisit Obnoxious Rhinoceros, see what he's up to. Here he's in a kiddie pool with his girlfriend, a gazelle. Did you ever notice that sometimes real jerks have delightful wives? This is actually how I spent my Father's Day a couple weeks ago. A good portion of it having cocktails in the kiddie pool. And we had this swarm of wasps take over the area, so I actually did sit there with a can of bug spray and shot down some wasps, which is a delightfully good time. Obnoxious Rhinoceros is the original prompt that started me doing this like 30 years ago. Maybe not quite 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I had a friend, I'd look for something to draw, and left to my own devices, I was always drawing guitars or sailboats or something like that. And I was feeling uninspired. So my friend got out a dictionary and he opened it to a random page and put his finger down and picked out the nearest noun and repeated the process with the nearest adjective, and we came up with obnoxious rhinoceros, and I drew it. And over the last 25 years, when I was without an inspiration, I'd ask my kids for a random noun or adjective or somebody else and draw the result.